There are many people who are fed up trying to cope up with our new generation's attitude and behavior. They include managers, leaders, and of course, parents. Millennials and Gen Z are the generation who are perceived to be autonomous, entitled, imaginative, self-absorbed, defensive, myopic, abrasive, unfocused, and indifferent. There are few factors that are responsible for the behavioral traits seen in millennials and Gen Z, like technology, shared memories of world events, and environment. But the primary factor responsible is parenting. Yes, you heard it right, parenting. In this video, I'll explain to you how a poor parenting strategy contributed majorly to the challenges our new generation faces today. Let's dive straight into it. Give me a dozen of healthy infants, well-formed, and my own specified world to bring them up in, and I'll guarantee to take anyone at random and train him to become any type of specialist I might select. Doctor, lawyer, artist, merchant chief, and yes, even beggar man and thief, regardless of their talents, penchants, tendencies, abilities, vocations, and race of his ancestors. This was a very famous quote made by a very influential American psychologist of the 20th century named John Watson. Watson wrote many books which influenced Americans during the Great Depression time. Watson was one of the first major proponent in shifting the focus of psychology from the mind to behavior. And this approach of observing and controlling behavior came to be known as behaviorism. He wrote a book on that, but the reason we are talking about John Watson here is for his book named Psychological Care of Infant and the Child, which was published in 1928. If your childhood memories remind you of your father being a very authoritative person at home, then somewhere that gets its inspiration from John Watson's work. This of course excludes eastern part of the world. Countries like India, Japan, China did not learn parenting strategy from the Western world. Also, at that time, unlike today, we did not have internet and ebooks. So any new information was not available to all at the same time, like today. So John Watson's parenting guide almost became a guide to parents of the Western world. Watson believed that children should be treated as young adults. He advised in his book that never hug or kiss your children. Never let them sit on your lap. Only one kiss is allowed on the forehead when they say good night. Shake hands with your children in the morning. Give them a pat on their head if they have done a great job. Let them solve their own problems. Almost right from their birth, keep rotating caregivers to prevent any unhealthy attachment to any one adult and preventing any cuddling affections which prevents a child from conquering the world. From generations to generation, this parenting style became the norm. People going to school or work had absolutely no issues with an authoritative teacher or an authoritative manager at work, since they were trained to be mentally and emotionally tough by their parents right from their childhood. At home, they were used to get orders from their parents, so they had absolutely no issues taking orders at work. Or for that matter, just a verbal recognition of great work kid was enough to motivate them rather than any bonus or any incentives. The generation of kids who were raised in this manner came to be known as the silent generation, or the traditionalist generation, or what we know as the builder generation. Most Americans regarded this particular generation as their greatest generation. During their childhood, this builder generation saw hardships of the Great Depression, and post-World War II, when American economy started booming, this generation started getting into workforce, and with their instilled values and childhood training, they made America economically very, very strong. But this parenting approach was not continued, and that's where lies the root cause of most of the problems we see in our current generation. In the mid-1940s and thereafter, one more study started getting everyone's attention. Dr. Benjamin Spock was an American pediatrician and a left-wing political activist. He was the first American pediatrician to study psychoanalysis in an attempt to understand children's needs and family dynamics. His ideas about childcare were radically different and significantly changed the attitudes of parents towards the rearing of infants and children. And he did this via his book named The Common Sense Book of Baby and Child Care, published in 1946 with multiple editions released for many years thereafter. This remains one of the best-selling volumes in history. By the time Dr. Benjamin Spock died in 1998, this book sold over 50 million copies. So what was this book all about which changed the parenting style of so many countries? And even now, as we are making this video, Dr. Spock's parenting style is being practiced in many big and developed countries. Dr. Spock wrote that parenting should not be made such a stressful act. Parenting can be fun. Instead of strict disciplinary mode, parents can be flexible and see their children as individuals. Parents can be friends with their children, love them, motivate them, encourage them. Dr. Spock's work started spreading like wildfire, and doctors all over the world who used to warn young parents against spoiling their kids started encouraging them to meet their baby's needs, not only for food but also for comforting and loving. Dr. Benjamin Spock successfully changed the parenting style from training to nurturing. As the Western world, due to the industrial revolutions, got richer and richer, and their economic status made them superpowers, directly or indirectly, they started influencing other countries' culture and aspiration. Add to that the advent of technology, internet, and globalization. People now had access to information. Electronic media showed them on TV and the internet about the lifestyle and culture of other countries. Even in India, I saw many parents of middle class and wealthy families getting influenced by how American or British was raising their kid. How they are hugging and loving their kids, saying I love you or saying you are special too often to their kids to bolster their confidence level. Overall, the world has become much more affluent and parents have more money now to give more and more to their kids. So millennials and Gen Z are entitled and that affects them at work. Also now, the primary authority figure in this new generation's life, which ideally should have been their parents, are not authoritative anymore. So now they have big issues coping up with an authoritative teacher at school or an authoritative manager at work. A manager or a leader needs to understand this and be compassionate to this generation. This problem is of course very acute in the Western world since it has its sources there, but it has its reach in countries like Japan, China, India and others. For example, in India, since we have a very old civilization history, most of our population still follows a very traditional authoritative parenting style, which is majorly value-based. And I think same is true for other Eastern countries as well, like China, Korea, Japan and so on. So the behavioral issues that we see with millennials and Gen Z is not so acute in the eastern part of the world, the only exception being the behavioral traits arising out of technology addiction. So the sole purpose of making this video was to make some managers and leaders and maybe some parents to understand that they might not have heard I love you so often from their parents, but they knew that their parents loved them. But this particular generation needs to hear I love you often to feel loved and valued. Now we cannot go back and roll back some of the parenting mistakes that were made. So we have to be understanding, show empathy and be compassionate to this new generation. Wait for the next video of this series, but know this that I have made a complete series last year on managing your physical, emotional, mental and spiritual energy. And if you want to keep watching my videos, then I will recommend you to click here and watch this video next. I'll see you there.